The barn door creaked like something alive. Dust rolled low across the sawdust floor, and the smell of sweat, horses, and fear filled the air. The summer heat pressed down heavy on every man standing inside. A few horses stamped and snorted in their stalls, but no one looked their way. All eyes were on the wooden platform at the center of the barn. Allora Calloway stood there, her hands clutched tight in front of her. The faded dress she wore had once belonged to her mother. It hung loose now, too big for her small frame. The collar yellowed and the seams frayed. A wide bonnet shaded her face, but not enough to hide the purple bruise running along her jaw. She didn't cry. She didn't move. She just stood still and tried to breathe through the stench and the whispers. "Unclaimed bride's final call!" the auctioneer shouted, his voice snapping through the hot air. The men watching shifted, boots scraping, spurs clicking. Some leaned on the railings, grinning. Some spat tobacco on the ground. Others just stared. They had already taken 4 girls that morning. None had screamed, not loud enough for anyone to care. The auctioneer stepped closer and lifted Allora's chin. His fingers were rough, and she flinched, but he didn't stop. "Virgin stock," he said, turning her face toward the crowd. "Untouched, starting at 3 silver. The barn went silent. Then, from the shadows in the back, a voice came low and steady. 3. Heads turned. A tall man stepped forward, dust on his long coat, hat pulled low to shade his eyes. He wasn't smiling. He didn't look at her like the others did. He just walked to the platform, dropped 3 coins into the auctioneer's palm and said, "I claim nothing." The auctioneer froze. The crowd murmured. Then the cowboy, his name was Cole Jarrett, stepped to the edge of the platform and did something no one expected. He dropped to one knee in the dirt before her. The whole barn went quiet. Even the horses stopped shifting. Allora's breath caught in her throat. He reached down, untied the cracked leather straps of her boots, and set them carefully beside her. His hands were steady, his touch gentle. "You don't belong to them," he said quietly. "And you don't belong to me. I just bought your silence from monsters." Her knees trembled. The sound of his voice felt heavier than the room. She didn't understand it yet, but something inside her cracked open. Not fear, not disbelief. Something new. He stood, took off his coat, and placed it around her shoulders. "You're free to walk out that door," he said. Then he turned his back to the crowd and started toward the exit. No one spoke. No one stopped him. Allora followed. Not because he asked her to, but because for the first time in her life, someone hadn't told her what to do. Outside, the air was cooler. The sun was sinking low, painting the sky in orange fire. A wagon waited by the fence. Cole climbed onto the driver's bench and took the reins. He didn't look back, but when he spoke, his voice was calm. "You coming?" She hesitated, looking back at the barn, the men, the noise, the cage she'd just stepped out of. Then she climbed up beside him. The wagon rolled forward, creaking with each turn of the wheels. They rode in silence. The road stretched long and empty through the dry hills. The sound of the horses' hooves was the only thing between them. As they rode, thunder rumbled far off in the mountains. Allora flinched at the sound. Cole slowed the horses without a word. The silence between them wasn't sharp like she was used to. It was gentle, almost safe. After a while, he spoke again. "You can sleep soon. There's a cabin ahead." When they reached it, the cabin stood small and sturdy beneath a line of tall pines. Smoke drifted from the chimney. He stepped down, opened the door, and stood aside. "It's warm inside," he said. "You don't have to go in if you don't want to." She looked at him, then at the cabin. The smell of pine smoke reached her nose, soft and familiar. She stepped inside. The fire burned steady in the hearth. 2 plates sat on the table, waiting. He walked to a shelf, took down a kettle, and poured hot water into a tin cup. "There's a blanket on the chair," he said. "You can eat if you want, or rest." She didn't move at first. Her fingers clutched the coat around her shoulders. "What now?" she asked. "Now you breathe." She didn't trust it. The quiet, the kindness. She had lived her life surrounded by slammed doors, angry words, and men who only took. "Why did you bring me here?" she asked. "Because this is a place with no locks." She watched him sit at the table and break the bread in half. He didn't look at her. He didn't ask her for anything. Slowly, she stepped forward, took the spoon he offered, and sat down. The stew burned her tongue, but she didn't stop eating. It tasted like something real. "What's your name?" she asked. "Cole Jarrett," he said. "Allora." "Good name." When the fire burned low, he placed a second blanket near the hearth. "You can take the bed," he said. "I'll stay here." She shook her head. "I don't want to be touched." He nodded. "I won't touch what isn't offered." For the first time in years, her body loosened. Her breath came easy. She lay down near the fire, wrapped in the blanket, and closed her eyes. That night, for the first time since her mother died, Allora slept without fear. And as the fire crackled low, Cole Jarrett sat quietly in the chair, staring into the flames. He had bought her for 3 silver coins, but not to own her, to save her. In the dark, neither of them knew that this moment, this fragile piece, would change everything that came after. The morning light crept through the cracks in the cabin walls, soft and gold. Allora woke to the smell of coffee and fresh bread. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. The fire was still alive, the air still warm. Her heart wasn't racing. She listened for shouting, for boots on the floorboards, for the sound of doors slamming. But there was nothing, only quiet. Cole stood by the stove, sleeves rolled to his elbows, turning a skillet of eggs. He didn't turn when she stirred. He just poured coffee into a tin cup and set it on the table. "Morning," he said. She sat up slowly. "Morning." Her voice came out small, but it didn't shake. "Eat," he said. "You'll need strength if you plan to keep walking." "Where would I go?" she asked. "That's for you to decide," he said, sitting down at the table. "You're not trapped here." She looked around the cabin, the table, the 2 chairs, the tools on the wall, the single bed in the corner. Everything looked lived in but clean, careful. She took the cup and sipped. The coffee was bitter but warm. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. Cole met her eyes. "Doing what?" "Treating me like I matter." He didn't look away. "Because you do." The words hit harder than she expected. She didn't know what to do with them, so she stayed quiet. After breakfast, he stepped outside to mend a loose shutter. Allora followed and sat on the porch steps. The air smelled of pine and smoke. The valley stretched out below them, golden and wide. She watched him work, each swing of the hammer steady, sure, unhurried. He didn't grunt or curse like men she'd known. He just worked. When he finished, he set the hammer down and looked toward the trees. "You used to live near the river, didn't you?" She frowned. "How'd you know?" "Your accent," he said, "and your hands. You've worked fields before." She looked down at them. The skin was raw and red at the knuckles, the nails short and torn. "Used to help my mother," she said, "before she passed." He nodded. No questions, no pity. Just quiet understanding. Later that afternoon, he brought out a folded dress and set it on a chair. "It was my sister's," he said. "You can wear it if you want." "No rush." She touched the fabric, soft, clean, smelling faintly of soap. It wasn't new, but it was cared for. Something inside her softened. That night, she watched him by the fire, carving a small piece of wood with a sharp knife. The sound of the blade scraping through the grain was steady and slow. She stepped closer. "What are you making?" He smiled faintly. "Don't know yet." She stood beside him, arms crossed. "My mother used to sew," she said. "Mine too," he said quietly. For a long while, the only sound was the fire popping. Then she spoke again, voice softer. "Will you braid my hair?" He looked up. "If you want." "I do." He pulled a stool close to the fire. She sat. His fingers moved gently through her hair, untangling the strands with care. No rush, no tugging, just calm hands. "No one ever touched me without wanting something," she whispered. "I'm not no one," he said. When he finished, he tied the end of her braid with a strip of soft leather. She turned to look at him. "Why did you kneel in that barn?" He met her gaze. "Because everyone else stood over you. Someone needed to meet you eye to eye." Her chest tightened. She hadn't realized how much weight she carried until that moment. "You're not what I expected," she said. "Neither are you." When she stood, she didn't step away. He didn't move closer. They just stood there, sharing the same quiet space. "Do I owe you anything?" she asked. He shook his head. "No, but you own everything that happens next." That night, she chose to sleep in the bed, not because she was told to, but because she could. Cole stayed by the fire, quiet as ever. The next morning, the snow began to fall. Light at first, then steady. Cole was outside chopping wood when Allora stepped out in the borrowed dress. It hung a little loose, but it covered her well. She watched him split a log clean in two. He looked up when he noticed her but didn't speak. "I want to help," she said. He nodded and handed her a smaller piece of wood. She set it on the block, lifted the axe, and swung. The blade missed and clanged against the dirt. She winced. "You don't have to be perfect," he said, "just honest." She tried again. This time the log split clean. A small smile touched her lips. "They always said I was weak," she said. "Too soft, too small." "They lied," he answered. "You're not broken. You were bought. That's not the same thing." She swallowed hard. No one had ever said that to her before. By noon, they had stacked wood shoulder high. She wiped sweat from her brow. "What do you want from me?" she asked. He set down the axe, took his time before answering. "Quiet mornings," he said. "Someone to share coffee with. Someone who doesn't flinch when I move." Her eyes filled. "That's all?" "That's everything." Inside, the fire burned bright again. She peeled potatoes while he sharpened his knife. After a while, she spoke softly. "Why me?" Quote. He stopped carving. "Because you still had fight in your eyes." She looked toward the flames. "You braid my hair," she said, "but you don't touch me." He nodded. "That's the kind of touch that matters, the one that waits." She turned toward him. "How long will you wait?" "As long as it takes for you to stop asking why someone can be kind without a cost." The firelight flickered across his face. She felt the tears before she could stop them. For the first time in years, they didn't burn. They healed. Outside, the snow kept falling. Inside, something fragile and new was beginning to grow. The snow had melted by the third morning. The air smelled clean, the sky pale and soft, like the world had been washed. Allora stood at the doorway of the cabin, watching the sun rise over the ridge. Her braid hung loose down her back, and the old fear that used to live in her chest felt smaller now, quieter. She was still learning what it meant to breathe without looking over her shoulder. Cole was by the woodpile, splitting logs in his steady rhythm. He didn't look up right away, but when he did, his eyes warmed. No words were needed. She walked down the steps, picked up a smaller piece of wood, and set it on the block. He handed her the axe. She swung clean, the log cracked, and the sound echoed through the valley. "You're getting better," he said. "I'm getting free," she replied. He gave a small smile and turned back to his work. The wind moved through the trees, carrying the smell of pine and smoke. Inside the cabin, a small boy's laughter broke the quiet. Caleb, Cole's nephew, barely 6, had been living with them for weeks now. His parents had been lost in a storm the winter before, and Cole had taken him in. Allora hadn't meant to care for him, but it had happened naturally. The child clung to her skirt, followed her around the cabin, and fell asleep near her side each night. That morning, she found him sitting at the table, tracing letters into the dust with a stick of charcoal. "Morning, Caleb," she said. He looked up and grinned, missing 2 front teeth. "Mornin', Miss Allora." Quote. She poured him milk from the jug and sat beside him. Watching him made her chest ache in a good way, the kind of ache that comes from seeing something whole after living through so much broken. Cole stepped in, brushing snow from his boots. "We'll ride into town this afternoon," he said. "Need to trade for seed before the ground thaws." Allora nodded. "I'll pack food for the road." When he left again, she looked around the small cabin, the bed neatly made, the dishes washed and stacked, the hearth glowing warm. It wasn't grand, but it was theirs. Later that day, she found the wooden box Cole kept on the shelf, the one that used to hold bullets. Now it held something else. Inside lay the leather braid he had tied from her hair that first week. She'd given it to him when she didn't know what her life meant. Now she held it again, running her fingers over the worn strip. She looked at him across the room. "You kept it," she said. He nodded. "It reminded me what choice looks like." She sat beside him, eyes on the fire. "That part of me, the one they tried to own, it's over now." She placed the braid back into the box and closed the lid. "Keep it if you want, but I don't need it anymore." He studied her quietly. "It's safe either way." That night after supper, she carried her old auction dress outside. It was clean now, the stains scrubbed away, the fabric soft from washing. She knelt in the snow behind the cabin and dug a small hole with her bare hands. The ground was cold but giving. She buried the dress carefully, pressing the dirt flat. When she stood, her palms were brown and trembling, but her heart was steady. She whispered, "You don't own me anymore." When she came back inside, Cole was rocking slowly in the wooden chair, carving another bird from pine. He didn't ask where she'd been. She didn't sit across from him this time. She sat beside him. He looked at her hands, dirty and raw. "You buried it," he said quietly. "Yes." He nodded once, then handed her the small wooden bird. "You made this?" she asked. "For Caleb," he said. "Something to keep when the storms come back." She turned the carving over in her hands, tracing the smooth wings. Then she spoke softly. "I'm not staying because I owe you." "I know," he said. "I'm staying because I like who I am here." He smiled, small, honest, nothing forced. "That's what I hoped." The firelight flickered between them. She leaned her head on his shoulder. The world outside went quiet. After a long silence, she whispered, "Do you still want to ask me proper one day?" He looked down at her, his voice rough and low. "Only if you ever want to be asked." She reached for his hand and placed it over her heart. "This is me saying yes," she said. "Not because you bought me. Because I choose to." He said nothing, just held her hand like it was something holy. The next morning, Caleb's laughter filled the yard. Cole pulled him across the snow on a small sled made from scrap wood and rope. The boy's joy rang through the pines. Allora watched from the porch, arms folded, smiling through the chill. The wind picked up, but she didn't flinch. She didn't shrink. She stood tall, sunlight catching the edge of her braid. She was no longer the girl sold for 3 silver coins. No longer the frightened soul who waited for doors to slam. She was something new, someone unclaimed, someone free, someone loved without price. Inside, the fire burned bright again. She stepped through the doorway, the warmth wrapping around her. This time, it didn't feel like borrowed heat. It felt like home.